T.B.Photo X1.5 TFX, and welcome back to another video. Well, might be a little bit overdue, I might add, because yeah, I took a bit of a hiatus for a couple of months, just, you know, work and work-related tendencies that made me have to put this project on a back burner, unfortunately. But anyway, I would like to digress and jump straight into it, shall we? Well, I have, like many others, jumped on the mirrorless bandwagon with this, the SONY A6000 or Alpha 6000, a camera that came out in 2014, if I was not mistaken, and you can still get these new here in 2021, which is kind of a testament to the staying power and the relevance still of the A6000 series of the Sony mirrorless lineup. Well, after using this for a couple of weeks or months, actually, I've decided that this is the way of the future, and I'm gonna take all of my current photographic equipment, all the Nikons, the Mamiyas, the Hasselblads, all of that is going in the bin, and the only thing I'm gonna have with me are some of the keep the glass, because of the short flange distance in these cameras. You can basically adapt any lens to this system. So that's it. Of course not, psych, no, of course not. This is what this episode is going to be about. Testing equipment in chlorinated water. Giving it the spin cycle. Not feeling blue when it's all green. Passing off bad camera work as artistic. Feeling tired but excited after a day of diving, and I'm still sitting in a chair. Yes, that's a little bit of what we're gonna do in this video here, but yeah, I do have a little bit of a cheat sheet here with me, so bear that in mind. But anyway, yes, it's gonna be a little bit of my first exploits into underwater photography, a topic that is a whole different kettle of fish than land-based photography. So yeah, I was a little bit taken aback about the incredible differences there is between land-based and underwater photography. Well, we're gonna go a little bit into it, yeah, shall we? But first of all, yes, I have a new little camera that was purchased specifically for underwater photography, and is the not Nikon but Sony A6000. Yes, this little mirrorless camera has been along for quite a while. It was introduced in 2014, as stated. It has only one SD card slot, but it is a 24.3 megapixel camera, crop sensor. It can take up to 11 frames per second, and it can film in full HD. Because for me personally, right now, I think that 4K is a little bit overrated for what I need for my what I do, and for my workflow. 4K is a little bit over the top, so full HD, good enough for me. Anyway, it has 179 autofocus points. It has a native ISO from 100 to 256,000. So, and also good for underwater photography then, pop-up flash, which means that this can actually control other flashes, but more about that in a little while. Let's see, yes, it has the Sony E mount. So this is a camera that was made after the appropriation of Minolta by Sony, but also it was when they ditched the Minolta mount and went with their own proprietary Sony E mount. And as stated in the introduction, this camera can do dual purposes, because since it has the short flange distance between the the bayonet mount and the actual sensor plane, there is a plethora, I should probably say, excuse me, of lenses that are adaptable to this camera system. What else do we have? Well, it has for the time being only the kit lens that comes with it, which is a 16 to 50 millimeter f3.5 to 5.6 OSS kit lens with power zoom and internal stabilization. Noteworthy on this camera model is that the lag between the light hitting the sensor and it being displayed on either the back screen or the electronic viewfinder is 0.06 seconds. So yeah, that's a little bit in short about the Sony A6000. And just to spoil it a little bit for you, I haven't used this one underwater yet because I have tested a little bit I have to test this a little bit more first, I believe. This is the Sea Frogs underwater housing, acrylic or underwater, plastic underwater housing for the A6000 series, or it can use this camera housing, as it says right on the front. It is a waterproof casing for the A6000, the 6300 and the 6500. So it has a lot of control dials and levers and so on that is not applicable to the 6000 model, but applicable to its newer derivatives. But anyway, this camera housing has been reviewed a lot on YouTube, I have seen, and based on what it is and my needs, it felt like a good investment for the beginner underwater snapper. Anyway, Sea Frogs, maybe one of the few accessories that I would get for this one is one of those wet dome wide angle converters, because there is only a few lenses that can be used between the 6000 series and the CNC housing, and I've actually taken this from the CNC's website, and here is a list of the lenses that are compatible with the the Sea Frogs housing, and it is the kit lens, the 16 to 50, the Samyang AF 35mm f2.8 FE, the Sony E35mm f1.8 OSS, the Sony Sonar T-Star FE 35mm f2.8 ZA, the Sigma 19mm f2.8 DN art lens, and the Sigma 30mm f2.8 EX DN. And keep in mind, this is taken from Sea Frog's website, so it's the manufacturer themselves that has proclaimed that those lenses should be compatible with this housing. Not my own experience, but that's what the manufacturer states. Well, I actually went to, last week, the 10th, I actually went with the local dive club to Stavsnäs, Vinterhamn, Stavsnäs Winter Harbor, which is this place in Stockholm, a little bit almost out in the archipelago, not really, but borderline, and yeah, it's a ferry terminal and so on, and then it's a little bit of a bay in there on the side that has been used for diving. And there is a lot of great underwater videos and so on from that place. I'm gonna put some of them in the description below, so yeah, if you're interested in that, and that's what it's gonna be about. Okay, well, for the first, then what that dive was about. Well, one of the other divers in the club was going to do their CMAS 3-star rating, which is that they had to become, you know, basically a dive master, if that's the equivalent terminology. And I thought I would go and get some video and so on. So actually, I have this non-brand specific action cam. It's not a GoPro, just to be clear, but I had it in a configuration that I thought would work as a noob on a selfie stick with a little bit of a LED light and the action camera on top. But unfortunately, because of the kind of diving that occurs in the Baltic Sea and so on, and the place we were at, there is a lot of particles in the water that has been stirred up from boat traffic, swimmers, other divers, and so on. So I have done my little, 2.0 version, and here it is on a selfie stick. And my thought pattern behind this one is basically that I have the camera mounted on this side, the right side here. It's a Cam Park, which is basically a Chinese knockoff of GoPro, and Subtig, which is this little light, this 3 LED light that has been, this is the strongest, and there's a middle, and then you have an SOS beacon. So yeah, and the reason for this is to combat something known as backscatter. And for you guys who are not into diving and underwater photography, backscatter is basically a phenomenon when you have particles in the water in front of you that can reflect light back to you. So as I had it before, that I had the action cam and the light directly beneath, I had direct backscatter because the light was basically completely in line with the camera. But the thought pattern behind this is that I can now turn it like this, basically. So I have an angle, the light on an angle, and the camera pointing straight forward, and this as an angle. That means that you will light the subject indirectly and minimize backscatter with still having a correctly lit subject. So that's a little bit of the thought pattern behind. So this would be the 2.0 version of the underwater action camera rig in, yeah, let's see if it might try this out in a future dive and see if it will work as intended. Yes, here is a little bit of a montage of my bad underwater videography with the action cam on the selfie stick as I showed prior. And for you guys who suffer from the motion of the ocean, yeah, it's diving after all, you can look in the comment section below, and there will be a little bit of a time code for if you want to skip this part. camera I actually brought also on the dive was actually this little thing, the CNC. What is it now again? I can never remember these. You know, the DX1G, which is also now a very old camera. This is actually a rebranded Ricoh camera that was very good for its time, but today it might almost be considered a vintage digital camera. Let's see here. Yeah, it's a 10 megapixel compact camera with a fixed zoom lens. It's actually the Ricoh Caplio GX100, and with its dedicated underwater housing here by CNC, it is depth rated down to 55 meters, and the digital sensor in the camera is actually a 10 megapixel CCD sensor, which is kind of different from the contemporary CMOS sensors that are used prolifically today. And the zoom in 35mm equivalents is a 24 to 72 millimeter zoom from 2.5 to 4.4. It has a single SD slot, and what made me go with this one, this was actually a find on Tradera, a seller that didn't really know what they had and sold this with some other gear. And yeah, basically this camera can shoot in camera raw, which means that I can do some very good editing, fairly decent editing I should say, in Lightroom for the photographs. So that's a little bit of an advantage in this package. Also, what I managed to get, here is one of the arms for holding the flash, so camera mounts on this tray and the flash unit goes up here, and it is triggered by fiber optic cable. Well, this is also a Tradera find. I actually got 4 of these on Tradera, and they are the CNC YS100 TTL strobes. And let's see here what it says. Let's see. Oh yes, the YS110 TTL strobe. It is a guide number of 22. It has a 13-step controllable power setting here, 13 increments. It has a dedicated slave mode in it and a modeling light. Now I don't have any batteries in this, so I can't really show you that, but the controls on the back side, you have the power setting here, you have the slave unit on off as a toggle, you have the center push button, which is the modeling light, and you have here the dial for the power setting. Well, let's see more what I can have found out about this one. There is a little bit of an interesting system that makes these flashes a bit universal for anybody out there who is interested in getting into underwater photography and CNC strobe units. There is a manual 1 and manual 2 and a TTL setting. The TTL setting, you need a TTL flash cord and a camera that uses camera TTL, like for instance the Nikonos-V, which I have over here, that classic camera. But anyway, back to the YS110. The YS110 has a, well, I have the diffuser here on the front, but you can see it has a triangular shape here with 3 flash guns and a center LED light emitter, and it has a 105-degree beam angle, and let's see, yeah, the color temperature on this one is 5400 Kelvin, and with the diffuser it's 5100 Kelvin. So yeah, that's good, and I have the diffuser on a lanyard, so I don't have to stow this in a BCD pocket or anything, so that's a little bit of a good feature. Okay, what else? Well, these are depth rated down to 60 meters actually, and yeah, that's a little bit with it. Oh yes, the difference between manual 1 and manual 2 is that manual 1 is for if you have a camera, like for instance both the CNC DX1G and the A6000, they both emit a pre-flash. And what is pre-flash? It means that when you press the trigger, you will get one flash and then the main flash. The pre-flash can both be used to meter for the TTL system in the camera, but it can also be used to prevent red eye in the subject if it's portrait photography with on-camera flash. So that's a little bit of it. So manual 1, the camera will ignore the pre-flash, and manual 2 is when you have a camera that doesn't use pre-flash. So in essence, if you have it on manual 2, you can use this as a standalone flash, but from my experience it doesn't really trigger that well on manual 2 if you have it as a standalone standalone slave flash without using a fiber optic cable. But I digress. I have another version of the CNC flash strobes which I didn't use this time around, and it's the YS27DX, which is a flash that is a little bit weaker with a guide number of 20, but it has the same 105-degree angle of beam, but it is also a little bit more sensitive when it comes to using it as a standalone slave flash. But also it doesn't unfortunately contain a modeling light, so pros and cons to them, I guess. But anyway, that's a little bit of it.
You want to take diving to the next level. We enable life underwater without restrictions. You expect perfection in order to venture to the edge and back. We develop state-of-the-art products for all categories of divers, from military to recreational. You enjoy discovering the wonders of the sea, as well as the moments surrounding them. We share your passion while filled with confidence. You value ultimate performance over mainstream items. We invent cutting-edge equipment pushing both technology and design. You demand world-leading diving equipment. And we are Poseidon.
Of course, when you're doing something like this and you're new for the season, we actually did a little bit of a practice dive at Fyrishov, so that was in a swimming pool. So yeah, that's a little bit of what I started out with the CNC DX1G, and it was basically to get a little bit of familiarization with it on the water. And well, with this and with the tray and the flash arm and so on, there were a couple of things that I didn't really care for with this camera system. And first of all, on the top here on the camera, you have the mode selector dial, and it is very hard to manipulate that underwater. You have that control here. Oh, actually, when we go back to this one, one con I found with this one underwater is to manipulate the flash power setting. If you are in a colder environment like we are here in Sweden, the Baltic and so on, even though it's the middle of the summer and we're actually in a heat wave right now, it's basically 30 degrees Celsius outside, it was a bit of a pain to manipulate the flash power setting when using my diving gloves. So if you have gloved hands with neoprene gloves and so on, it's a bit fiddly to get a good purchase on the controller for the flash power. But that's basically practice, I guess. But going over to the housing actually for the DX1G, what I noticed is that you have all the control buttons on the back side here, and they are a little bit fiddly to manipulate with gloves as well. Although the zoom buttons, these two silver ones up here, they were actually quite easy to manipulate with the system. The trigger, nothing really spectacular there, that was very good as well. The f-stop control up here, the twist button here, that actually worked fairly decently actually, to manipulate the f-stop or the iris. That worked, but the main things that I didn't really enjoy with this system is firstly the control dial up here for different modes. There is not really the feedback, the physical feedback is fairly tame here. You know, if you listen to this one, you can actually hear the clicking, the positive clicking when it comes to the mode selector dial. But when you use it underwater with this dial, there's not really that much of tactile feedback when you are in a certain position, because sometimes I notice that you get stuck in between positions, and yeah, it is a little bit fiddly. So my advice there is to just pick a mode to use and just set it and forget it, leave it be. The same can be said for the control in the back here. This is actually a dual control. You can push it to access a menu with some different settings like white balance and metering and so on. But then when it comes to the side-to-side movement, it's fairly stiff. It's something that you actually have to take your entire hand and almost like you're turning a key in a key lock when you manipulate it. And what you manipulate this, it's actually the shutter speed. So on the front you have f-stops for depth of field, and in the back you have the shutter speed. And it's very stiff and hard to manipulate on the water in my experience, but that's just basically my experience. Might be a little bit better with practice and with more use, but that's basically for me for now my feedback on this system. Although this is a vintage underwater camera system by today's standards, I would say that if I compare what I feel with the sea frogs, there is quite a bit of a difference. It's more transparent. You can actually see a little bit of the controls that you're manipulating, but keep in mind, if you're underwater and you have low visibility, it might be a little bit hard to see what your settings are at the time being. But anyway, I feel that these are a little bit easier to manipulate and so on, but what I do have a little bit of a apprehension with this one is that thickness. I have fairly small hands actually, and the grip here is basically taking up all of my hand space basically, and it's a little bit of a reach to get to the yellow trigger to trigger the camera. But basically I will still have the big tray over there for this camera housing, and I think that then I have something more to manipulate it with. But only time will tell, but that's a little bit of apprehension I have for the time being. Okay, so a little bit about the dive itself. Well, the dive was actually 2 dives in the same day. As stated, a other diver in the club was going to do her 3-star rating, which meant that she had to lead a dive, which basically means that she will lead us, because most of us hadn't dived this site before. So she was basically going to guide us a little bit to get us familiar with the area. And after that one, we were going to do a second dive when she and the head instructor would stay on shore and be the surface personnel or the surface team, while we others go in pairs of 2 or more and plan a dive and do that as planned. yeah, so basically in the first one, when we actually had a guide, I used the action cam, and you will see a little bit about my poor camera work and the visibility that we had that day. And this second dive I actually used the CNC DX1G, and yeah, for a complete amateur in scuba diving and underwater photographer, I thought that I actually got away with some very interesting images, and we'll do a little bit of a montage with those. Yeah, I think that will sum it up a little bit. The visibility on this dive was about 1.5 to 3 meters, and we had quite green water, and yeah, I was diving, and yeah, actually the head instructor took this image of me. Yeah, I wasn't really ready for the image taken, but I was tired after the dive. But man, it was a brilliant experience indeed. But anyway, so yeah, but anyway, all in all, it was a terrific experience and something I am really looking forward doing more about and develop myself as an underwater photographer in the future. And as you know, I have those VHS tapes that has been converted to a DVD set and a USB stick for the Nikonos-V underwater camera. This was the premier underwater camera system. And if you look at this one, if I do it like so basically, and you see how tiny this camera is compared to how bulky these underwater housings are, I would really say that Nikon, if you want to get an advantage in the photography field, make something like the Nikonos-V, make a true Nikonos-6. I know you had the RS and so on, but if you could make a digital camera at the same caliber as the Nikonos-V, you would be in the money directly, I would guarantee it, because there is so much nostalgia out there for divers that were using the Nikonos system. I mean, I have the 3 back here with the SB101 flash. On this one, finally, I got a flash sync cord that fits to the SB105. So this is something I'm gonna take on a future dive trip, I guarantee you. And yeah, this is a little bit of a future project to use this underwater with a proper TTL, and maybe I'm gonna try first with Kodak Color Plus, and maybe graduate to something like Ektar, maybe even Ektachrome or Velvia, who knows, only time will tell. But I think I'm gonna start with a more everyday consumer grade film like Color Plus 200 ISO. But I think that that's a little bit all for me for now, and sorry for the hiatus, but yeah, good things for those who wait, hopefully. But anyway, as always, this is Tobias Bergström from T.B.Photo X1.5 TFX, and I'd like to see you guys in the next video. And as always, Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. So take care from now on. Bye.